Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the heroic mode version of Iron Qon in the Throne of Thunder raid. Now in order to complete this fight you're going to want to bring 2 tanks, however if you do, as I've said in pretty much every Throne of Thunder guide, have a paladin, then you can solo tank this. The only reason you do need 2 tanks is for the impale debuff that the boss will place on them. So they can obviously use abilities such as Bop in order to remove the impale debuff from themselves. As well as 2 tanks, you'll also want to bring 2 to 3 healers. The video in the background of this guide is a combination of both 2 and 3 healers. So, I mean, you'll see that we did kind of struggle when we actually killed the boss with 2 healers, but some of our previous attempts were with 3, where we were doing okay, but still struggling to a certain extent. And then finally, a mixture of both ranged and melee DPS. Now there have been quite a few changes from the normal mode version of this fight in order to kind of make it a heroic mode encounter, but this was the 5th one we killed in total, so it's kind of a difficult one, but at the same time you can do it fairly early on, so you don't need to worry about kind of having high gear levels in order to get to it. Now for the first part of this video we're going to look at how we dealt with it with 3 healers, and then explain why I feel the 3 is a lot better. But the majority of the fight is the same. The boss will still throw his spear and you'll still face the 3 Qwilin. However, from now on in the heroic mode version, the Qwilin, instead of killing them off one by one, will flee when they reach 25% health, and they will then become active in the final phase of this fight when you face Iron Qon himself. So in phase 4 you will be against Iron Qon and his 3 Qwilin mounts at the same time. Additionally, during the first 3 phases you will have different Qwilin helping out, and there will be some new abilities brought to the fight that you will need to be aware of. So let's actually move on to take a look at the fight now, and mainly the 3 Qwilin and how you're going to deal with facing 2 of them at the same time. So you'll still face all 3 in the same order. You'll go against Roshak, who is the molten one first, and then you'll go against Quetzal, who is the kind of lightningy one, and then you'll face Damran, who is the icy frozen one. So looking at Roshak first, during phase 1 when you face Roshak, you will also have Quetzal helping out during this fight, and he will bring 2 new abilities to the table during this phase. The first one is kind of an ability that is pulled over from when you face Quetzal himself, and this is Lightning Storm, and this is a debuff that will be placed on a random player, and if that player comes into contact with any others, it will spread to them, and they'll take so much lightning damage every second. It's just something that you need to heal through. It's nothing too intense really. And his second ability that he will gain is a new ability called Whirling Winds, and this is where he will spawn a tornado in front of him, and it will move in a straight line from where Quetzal is currently standing, and it will inflict 200,000 nature damage to anyone that gets hit by it, as well as knocking them back. It's relatively simple to see where this lightning tornado is coming from, so you should make, your best attempts to actually dodge it. Now, because during this phase you will still need to deal with the energy bar that Roshak has, so that he doesn't reach 100 energy, you'll still need players to stack up. Now this can cause a few issues because of the Lightning Storm debuff. However, we kind of found it was easier to cheese it, and instead of having people spread out and then stack up, at the very start of the fight we had all of our ranged players stack up first and take 6 stacks of the debuff, which is the Unleashed Flame ability. And after they've taken 6 stacks, we then got our melee player to move on top of our 2 tanks, and they would then take the remaining stacks that are needed for this phase. I think it was around 6 or 7. You'll probably find that the melee and the tanks do end up taking more damage in the long run, as there is less of them, so you could always consider moving a ranged player in, or just using their own cooldown abilities, such as we had a Death Knight using his anti-magic zone, and also he can use his own personal cooldown such as anti-magic shield, or we could use a Disc Priest bubble in order to help them take reduced damage. As well as these abilities, Iron Qon will still throw his spear in this phase, and you will still have to deal with moving away from the lava lines that will go through the raid. The only time this might cause some issues is when all of the ranged are stacked up, but it shouldn't be too bad. If you see in the video, we all stack up on the left hand side of the room to start with, and then as soon as the spear gets thrown, we all move to kind of the centre of the room in front of where the boss is currently being fought, and this just made it a lot easier for us to see where the lava lines were actually coming from, so we could preemptively move in order to dodge them and not take extra damage. This phase is probably one of the more healing intense phases, but don't worry if you do burn through too much of your mana, as you will be able to regen it later on in the fight. Once you've got Rorschach down to 25% health, he will then flee, and then you'll move on to phase 2 where you'll face Quetzal himself, and he will be aided by Damren during this phase. Now in this phase, Quetzal will still have his abilities from normal mode. He'll still have the Windstorm ability where you need to run out and avoid tornadoes, and he will still have the lightning lines that will come out from the spear that Iron Qon actually throws. Your DPS should be good enough so that you only have to deal with one of the windstorms, and this is mainly because he does flee at 25%. If he didn't flee, then you probably would have the issue of 2, but he doesn't, so you can push your DPS. Now, as I've mentioned, during this phase, Damren will appear, and again he will bring 2 abilities additionally to this phase. His first one is where he will randomly target players and he will freeze them and then shatter them, so this is kind of pulled over from his phase on its own, and this will deal raid-wide damage that you just need to heal through, unfortunately. Again, this is kind of a healing intensive phase, but during the next phase you should have no problems regenerating mana. As well as this ability, he will also bring a new ability called Frostspike, which will target a random player in the raid and it will spawn a frost spike at their feet. Now, it does have a cast time on it, and the player will be marked when a frost spike is going to be cast underneath them, so there is plenty of time for them to move and avoid it. If people do fail at moving from the frost spike, then they will take 150,000 frost damage. Now, during this phase, you will want to make sure that you are obviously all spread out, because he will still also have the arcing lightning ability, and this is where he will zap a random player, and you will need to click on that player in order to remove the debuff from them. Once you've clicked on this player, they will then gain the lightning debuff on them, and this will spread to other players if you are standing near them. Again, this is just something that has to be healed through, unfortunately. During the windstorm phase, you want to be using abilities such as the warlock portals in order to get out as fast as possible, and we found that having druids using their roars also helped a lot. And also, if you are a druid, spec in to displace a beast. It's really useful for this fight, and even if you are resto and you need to kind of still heal people, just get out as fast as you can and then heal them up. It's a really good talent I've found to use. And as before, when Quetzal does reach 25% health, he will then flee, and you will then need to move on to killing Damren, and you will enter phase 3. Now, during phase 3, when you do fight Damren as the main target, he will be getting aid from Rorschach, and we'll speak about him in a moment. Now, Damren will still have his abilities from normal mode. He will still attack Iron Qon's spear, and you'll still have to dodge the ice lines that will move out from it, which is fairly simple to do, really. He will still also freeze players and cause raid-wide damage that you just have to heal through. And he will also still reflect 10% of the damage that he takes back at the attackers. So this is just something that your healers have to look out for. However, you will find that this phase is really, really easy to heal through, and you won't need to worry about your mana as much because it will regen. And it might not feel like it is, but as soon as phase 4 hits, you'll just be like, oh, okay, I'm now back to like 90% mana from 20%. How's that just happened? It is just pretty much blanket AoE healing the raid. That's all there is to it. Put a few hots on people and they're good to go. Now, Damren will also still cast his Dead Zone ability, where he will shield himself from 2 sides, and you'll have to move in order to attack him. Now, you can use this to your advantage as well, and we'll speak about that after we've taken a look at Rorschach. So, as I have said, Rorschach will be present during this phase, and thankfully you only have to deal with one ability from him, unlike in the other 2 phases. and he will bring along his Unleashed Flame ability, which is where he will target the largest clump of enemies he can find, and he will fire the random fire bolts of doom at them. Now, we found that these were cast at kind of really lengthy intervals. It didn't seem to work on an energy bar system, so we just had our melee stack on top of our tanks throughout the whole of this phase and just take all of the Unleashed Flames, because by the time the second one was cast, the debuff from the first one had already ran off. So that is something to consider. Otherwise you could just organise 2 separate groups to stack up as and when needed, and stacking up might also help out for AoE healing in this phase, saving even more mana. Now, I did mention that you can use Damran's Dead Zone ability to your advantage, and this is due to the way the phase transitioning actually happens. If Dead Zone is active when Damran reaches 25% health, you will not transition into the next phase until the Dead Zone has disappeared. So what we advise you do is you get him to around 27-26% health, and then just wait for him to cast Dead Zone. And then as soon as he casts Dead Zone, you then want to use your Bloodlust, Time Warps, Heroism, or your pots and whatnot, and just completely nuke him down. And then by the time the Dead Zone fades and you enter the phase 4 where you face Iron Qon and the remaining Qilin, he should be near dead, and then you should have like a few seconds left just to kill him off. This will help you off greatly because he kind of is the biggest cock block for DPS due to the shielding, and he is the person that you want to kill off first in phase 4. When you enter phase 4, you will then have to deal with Iron Qon and any remaining Qilin that are alive. Now, during this phase, Iron Qon will pull across his normal mode abilities. He will still cast his Fist Smash every now and then. He will still have his Rising Anger, where he increases in damage by 10% every so many seconds, and he will also ignite and freeze Cyclones, which your raid does need to be aware of. Now, at the very start of this phase, as I've said, you will still have the Qilin alive, so you will have to deal with them. You'll obviously have to get one tank to pick up Iron Qon, preferably the tank that doesn't have the Impale debuff, and then you will also have to then get the other tank to pick up the 3 Qilin. Now, entering this phase, ideally you want the tank who has got Damran on him, who will be pulled across from the third phase, to not have the Impale debuff on him, as he will be picking up the other 2 Qilin, while your other tank picks up the Iron Qon boss himself when he does spawn. Now, you will obviously want to kill off Damran first, and you want to try and use the Dead Zone, Time Warp, Bloodlust, Heroism advantage that I mentioned. It might help you out significantly. Once you've killed off Damran, you then want to look to kill off Rorschach, and then you want to kill off Quetzal. This is just due to the amount of damage that each of them actually deals, and it just helps your healers save a bit of mana the faster you can kill off these mobs. You can also try and push the DPS a bit further on Damran so that you have Time Warp, Bloodlust or Heroism left for when you move on to Rorschach, and it helps you for burning him down slightly. You also want to look at doing some kind of cleave DPS as well so that you can start damaging Iron Qon while still focusing mainly on the Qilin and getting them deaded as fast as possible. Now, when it comes to Iron Qon himself, the strategy is fairly similar to the way normal mode works, just obviously he deals a hell of a lot more damage. Now, if you do opt to heal this fight, you will find that he does die very quickly, and I mean very quickly. However, just ignore the dead people in our raid in this video. That is the price you pay when it does come down to bringing 2 healers with you. If you do have 3 healers, obviously everything will be a lot more stable, and you'll be able to obviously keep people alive a fairly bit easier. But it is down to how your raid kind of works with their healers and their DPS composition, whatever they feel stronger. If your healers are really well geared, then you might as well just go and try 2 healing at least. Phase 1 will be relatively difficult. Phase 2 will also kind of be difficult, but the final 2 phases will ease off a little bit, and then they should be okay for the final phase when you're facing Iron Qon. So that's going to do it for this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide. I hope it helps you defeat this boss. And as always, you can head on over to www.flaskup.com/forums in order to discuss this encounter, or if you do have any questions, then you can directly ask me in the comments section below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.